This video is a remake of a rustic sofa table I built, recorded with a Galaxy Note 2 cell phone and using extremely limited tools. The reason I'm doing a remake of this is I'd like to narrate this video, and I also want to prove a point that you don't need a ton of tools to do some pretty cool stuff. Really, it's your imagination that limits you. For this project, I'm using a circular saw that was given to me, punched through some plywood I found in a dumpster, and a drill I picked up for $8 at a pawn shop, and these are the only two power tools I use for this whole build. I salvaged some pallet wood from behind a Home Depot, and one of the first things I needed to do was flat side the top. So after picking out the best pieces, I screwed a piece of 1/4-inch plywood to the bottom of what would be the top piece, ran it through the makeshift table saw with the plywood up against the fence to give me one straight edge, and then of course flipped it over to get another second straight edge, and those are the edges that I'm going to glue up. Now, I don't have a bunch of clamps in this video, so I'm going to use my workbench as a clamp surface. I screwed down some runners, or nailed down some runners, and then put the pieces for the top in between some blocks that I'd screwed down to the bench, and some wedges between the blocks and the top. So in keeping true to the extreme limited tools idea of this build, I didn't use a sander. I picked up a putty knife for 50 cents at the pawn shop when I bought my drill, and I just screwed it to the bench there like you see, and used a file to flatten the top, and then a piece of round stock to burr over the edge, and I'm going to use it as a card scraper. And just point of fact, this actually works really well, so if you're ever in a pinch and need a card scraper, an old putty knife works awesome. So after cleaning up the top side of it, I wanted to add some breadboards to this, so I'm screwing down some pieces to the underside of the top, and that's going to ride in my makeshift table saw and give me one really nice flat edge so I can add breadboards to it. So after I cut the breadboards out of another piece of pallet wood, I pre-drilled everything and then added them to the top. So I left my glue up set up in place because it was nice to have a spot that I could just clamp the top down and then use that as a way to hold the top while I was scraping it. So with the breadboards installed, I came back with my putty knife scraper and finished off the top. Now to give the top some color, I'm using a vinegar steel wool solution with some boiled down acorn caps to add some tan into the solution. And that gives you this kind of really cool, old beat up rustic look. Now for the legs, I'm using yellow birch branches as I harvested the year before. They're fairly dry and pretty straight, but I didn't want a rustic look on this entirely, so I made a jig for my table saw, used my drill as a motor to turn these legs round, and then I took a piece of sharp metal and kind of rounded over the edge, and I was able to add a nice little detail. Now I threw some stain on here, and then I used a little bit of homemade glaze I made from boiled down acorn caps to kind of set it off. Now because pallet wood is pretty bland and I wanted to sexy this up a little bit, I'm using some white birch bark that I had laying around as a veneer. So I just cut it on the table saw and glued it to what will be the apron with some wood glue. Now after that had dried, I cut some twigs and split them in half, and I'm going to use those to kind of detail this thing just to give it a little bit more sexy. Now for the final piece of flair, I grabbed a piece of pallet wood, drew out a pattern, and then I cut that out with my coping saw, and I'll use this as a medallion on the front of the apron. So after I cut out each of the individual pieces, I used a rasp, and we're going through a couple different courses to shape out the pieces, and some hand sandpaper to do the final sanding. So I added a little acorn cap to the center of it, and again using my vinegar solution with a little bit of boiled down acorn cap that just gives it a nice aged look. And then put the apron on the top and attach the legs using corner braces. I was really happy with the way this turned out, and it was a fun project. You can do a lot of really cool things with limited tools. Hey, thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and if you'd like to see more limited tools project, check out these videos below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. We're always up to something fun around here. Thanks again, and y'all take care.